Hey everybody. Today I am going to make something that we never had in the summer, but I'm just in the mood for it. So you may know this as Italian wedding soup. We never called it Italian wedding soup growing up. We either called it scuddol soup, that's what my grandmother called it because it's made with escarole. She called it scuddol, which was probably dialect. Or my mom called it holiday soup because we only had it on holidays. So, as you can imagine, the holiday meal in our home was huge. We always had the Italian dinner first, and then we had the American dinner. So, on Thanksgiving, you had to have turkey on Thanksgiving, but we also had a full Italian meal, which was antipasto, tray with salami, pepperoni, supersad, cheese, olives, all that stuff. And we were starving by that point because you don't get breakfast on a holiday. So you might get a meatball or, some bread or something like that. But by the time we sat down for dinner, usually around like 1 o'clock, you're starving. So you stuff yourself with the antipasto first. Then we have soup. And soup was either scuttle soup or scripels. And if you watch my video on freezer roulette, you'll see what the scripels are. I'll make a video showing you how to make scripels later. All right, so we had antipasto and then soup. Because this is a soup that we only had once or twice a year, you don't just have one little bowl. So a pretty hefty bowl and then go back for seconds. And with our scuddle soup or holiday soup, we also had croutons. And the croutons are these little bread cubes, that you buy for stuffing, dipped in egg and then deep fried. Really delicious in the soup, but it's a lot of trouble. I usually can't find the bread cubes. And, if I'm making this for a meal, it's too much. You have antipasto, you have the soup, you have pasta. We don't need the extra bread cubes, but we always had the croutons in our soup. Okay, and then you have pasta. So pasta was always homemade. It was something special, lasagna, ravioli, maybe gnocchi, right? But usually it was a more complex pasta dish with cheese and other ingredients. Pasta always came with meatballs and ribs and whatever other kinds of meat in the gravy. And then whatever dessert there was. Actually, on Thanksgiving, we didn't have dessert yet. So then you take a break. The women are in the kitchen washing dishes. The guys are watching football, usually falling asleep. And then we'd have the American meal. So on Thanksgiving would be turkey and stuffing and mashed potatoes, whatever vegetables, sides, and then dessert on Thanksgiving would be pie. Usually these meals lasted all day. We'd start eating at 1, we'd have the turkey or ham or whatever in the evening, so around 5 or 6. Amazing. I mean, amazing feat. My mother usually did this by herself. When we were just us kids, it was a family of 6, but then you start adding son-in-laws, daughter-in-laws, grandchildren, a random aunt and uncle, and we're talking, 10, 15, maybe 20 people for dinner. All right, so I digress. So back to the wedding soup. I know that everybody does theirs differently. Ours, we had croutons. Some people will put pastine, so a tiny pasta, maybe acini di pepe or something like that, maybe orzo. And some people make what they call crouton, but it's egg and cheese that is fried and or baked and then cut into little pieces. So I just make mine simple. It's just the greens and the meat. The reason that it's called wedding soup, apparently, I had to Google this. In Italian, it's Minestra Maritata, which translate into English as wedding soup or married soup. And the idea is that it's a marriage between the soup, the greens, and the meat. So the ingredients, the basic ingredients of a wedding soup are soup, usually chicken broth, some kind of greens. So in our case, escarole, and then meat, which are the little meatballs. All right, so I'm going to show you how to make the little meatballs, how I prepare the escarole, and then put it all together. So it's a simple, well, maybe it's not that simple. It is kind of simple. I mean, most Italian food is not that complicated. Just a few ingredients, pretty easy preparation. It's kind of hard to mess it up. It's a nice hearty soup. It can be a meal in itself. Okay, so I'm going to take you to the counter. I'll show you the ingredients that I'm going to use today. Okay, here are the ingredients for my scuddol soup. The biggest task, the biggest job, most involved is making the meatballs. And these tiny meatballs are really a pain to make because they take forever. So for the meatballs, I have some ground beef. I have a ½ pound of ground beef. And then at Whole Foods, they didn't sell loose pork. So I got a pound of pork, but I'm going to only use half. So our meatballs were usually pork, beef, and veal. It's kind of hard to find veal here in the Bay Area. I don't know why. I don't know if it's some kind of morality thing or what. People just don't eat veal. So when I make meatballs, I usually do half and half pork and half beef. I was thinking maybe I could use a pound of pork and a ½ pound of beef because I actually like pork more than beef. The beef tends to be dry. You want to use, this is 85% lean, so you don't really want to go any leaner than that because then your meatballs are really going to be dry. All right, so we have our meat, beef and pork. 1 egg, locatelli cheese, breadcrumbs, clove of garlic, and some pepper. So the locatelli is salty. You don't really need to add any more salt. But if you do, you could do it when you're frying. Okay, so that's for the meatballs. I have some chicken stock that was in the freezer. The escarole. So escarole is a slightly bitter green. It's not as bitter as broccoli rabe, but it does have a little bit of bitterness to it. And what I like to do is use the outer leaves for the soup and then save the heart of the escarole and use that for salad. So this inner part is a little bit more tender, slightly sweeter, and it makes a really nice salad because it's a hefty green, unlike lettuce, once you dress it, it's not going to get soggy. It kind of retains its crispness. So it's really nice in a salad or maybe even added to lettuce to give your salad a little bit of extra texture. I was actually looking for lettuce yesterday at Whole Foods, and their lettuce was just really nasty. It was like just soggy and brown and did not look good at all. It was on sale, but I still didn't want it. So I noticed that they had escarole. So I got the escarole actually to make salad, but said, why not? I'll just make some escarole soup today. It freezes well. One thing that we'll do, because escarole is not available year round, so you can blanch the escarole and then squeeze the water out of it, form it into a ball, wrap it in plastic wrap, and then freeze it. And then it's really easy to use. Same thing with the meatballs. You can make a bunch of meatballs and freeze them. So you could always have the ingredients in the freezer and just ready to go whenever you're in the mood. If you're going to make it, you might as well make a batch of it and save some for later. All right, so I'm going to start with the meatballs first. Okay, I decided to use a pound of pork, half a pound of beef, because what am I going to do with a half a pound of pork? So let's see how this works out. I chopped my garlic kind of medium fine. My mom, depending on whether she was cooking for just us or for the Medigans, if she was having Medigans over for dinner, she would make the garlic bigger because apparently Medigans don't like garlic. I don't know. So she would make it bigger so that they could pick it out if they wanted to. My mom also used parsley a lot. So she used parsley in meatballs. She used parsley in ravioli. I rarely use parsley. I just find it a waste of money. I buy a bunch of parsley and I just use a little bit for what? It doesn't really add any flavor. I don't really understand the purpose of parsley. So no parsley for me. Okay, so next I'm going to, let's see, I'll add my egg. I don't remember if there's an exact order for this. So egg and then the locatelli cheese. How much you put is up to you. The cheese is salty. It gives it a nice flavor. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it, really just covering the meat. So that looks pretty good. Pepper. Not adding salt because the cheese is salty. And then breadcrumbs. So these are plain breadcrumbs. Actually, these are breadcrumbs that I made yesterday because I had a roll that was kind of going stale. So I just broke it up into pieces, dried it out a little bit, toasted it lightly in the oven, and then ground it up for breadcrumbs. So again, the breadcrumbs, you're eyeballing it. I'm covering the meat. You don't want too much, but also not too little. Okay, and then the secret here is to wet the breadcrumbs. So normally I would just take the bowl over to the sink and do this on the sink, but I don't feel like moving the camera. That beeping is my soup defrosting in the microwave. All right, so wet the breadcrumbs. Some people use milk. We always use water. I've also seen people put ricotta cheese in their meatballs. So this is just a simple, basic meatball recipe. Egg, cheese, breadcrumbs, garlic, and pepper. And then you just want to mix it together. Keep an eye out for any clumps of breadcrumbs. I'm using one egg and I have basically 1.5 pounds of meat here. So even for if I had 2 pounds, I would still only use one egg. If you're going up more than 2 pounds, then you might want to double the eggs. So just kind of squeezing it to mix it together. I just want to make sure that the two meats are mixed well with each other, that my breadcrumbs are really incorporated. The cheese is distributed and that the garlic is mixed throughout. All right, that looks pretty good. Next, we do the fun process of rolling the meatballs. So, if you listen to podcasts, find a nice podcast to listen to, find something that's going to keep you busy while you do this because it is super tedious. All right, I'm going to be making two sizes of meatballs here just because I have so much meat. So first, a regular sized meatball. My mom's meatballs were big, so it'd be like that much. I don't like them that big because usually my gravy, I have sausage and ribs and other meat. And when friends come over, I want them to be able to take everything. So that's a good sized meatball for me. The mini meatballs, as small as you can tolerate, because you really are going to be making a lot of them. So that's a mini meatball. We tried to find a shortcut. I went to Italy with my brother and my sister in 2019, and we met one of our cousins, and she served us macaroni alla chitarra, which I will be making at some point, and from Abruzzo. So macaroni alla chitarra has little mini meatballs in the sauce. So she showed us this thing that was like a potato masher that they, prepare the meat and just lay it out on something flat, like a cookie sheet or something, and then use this little potato masher thing. It has holes in it, and then somehow they were able to make mini meatballs that way. Didn't work for me, so I'm just going to be sitting here rolling these meatballs. You don't need to watch me do this because it's going to take a while. So I'm going to cut off the video and I'll come back when everything is done. My meatballs are finished. It didn't take that long, maybe 15 minutes. I'm not really making too many. So, if you're making a holiday dinner for what, 6 to 10 people, you probably would want more meatballs than this. Maybe all of these would be mini meatballs. But just for me, for today, I don't have that much soup. So I made one plate of mini meatballs and then I got 10 bigger meatballs out of it. So I'm going to fry these up. Now, for the soup, I've seen people put their meatballs in raw, just cook them in the broth. That's a possibility. It probably gives it a different flavor. I like to fry my meatballs first. For the big meatballs, if I'm making a big dinner and I'm making gravy, so the gravy would have sausage, some kind of rib, pork, beef rib, maybe some neck bones or something. There's a lot of frying that's involved. So lately, I have been putting my meatballs in the oven and baking them. So I like to bake the meatballs while I'm doing other stuff. It kind of speeds things up a little bit. My mom always fried the meatballs. And really, every Sunday morning, we'd start off first thing after church. She'd be in the kitchen singing her church hymns and making meatballs. And fried meatballs were one of the first things that we ate on Sunday after church. Maybe we'd have a donut or something. So it's really, just the smell brings back a lot of memories. All right, so I'm going to fry these up and then we'll move on to starting the soup. I'm using vegetable oil. I usually use vegetable oil when I fry things. I guess you could use olive oil, but I don't know. I think it might just change the flavor. So I'm bringing my oil up. The heat is on high now. I just want to get a little bit of bubbling going on here before I put in the meatballs. I'm using a nonstick pan. I've had issues frying meatballs. It's another reason why I like to bake them. So I've had issues with the meatballs sticking to the pan. So nonstick pan with some oil. And then you want the temperature to be pretty hot. Not super hot, but starting to bubble. So that looks pretty good right now. All right, so I'm just gonna pop these in. They won't take that long. Okay, I'm frying the rest of the meatballs. They're looking good. Next, I'm going to put the bigger meatballs in and fry those. So those are just the extras, not for the soup, but so that I can have a little snack while I'm cooking here. One of the issues that I have when I'm frying bigger meatballs is they kind of lose their shape. So they get a little bit flat on the side that you're frying. So it's another reason why I like to bake them. They retain their shape a little bit more. But anyway, little things that you don't really need to worry about. So the other thing that I'm doing here is I have my stock in the pot. I added some fresh carrots and celery. When I make chicken stock, I of course use carrots and celery and onion, but then I strain all of that out and freeze the stock, or if I'm making soup that day, then I'll add fresh carrots and celery for the soup rather than the vegetables that have been boiling for hours. All right, so my meatballs are looking pretty good. I blanched the escarole, so that's in the sink cooling, and I'm going to let the soup come to a boil, let those carrots and celery cook a little bit, and then put everything together. Okay, so my escarole, I just blanched it in boiling water to soften it up, take some of the bitterness out. This is optional, you don't have to do this. I think my mom probably did it because probably we didn't like the bitter greens, but you know, it's a completely different flavor if you don't do this. So whatever you like. So escarole is not something that is widely available. I found it, like I said, at Whole Foods yesterday. I don't ever really remember seeing it at Whole Foods. I've gotten it at Safeway, but they don't always have it. Same thing with Berkeley Bowl. I saw it at Berkeley Bowl, but they don't always have it, or it's not always good. So if I see escarole, sometimes I'll just buy it because I know that I want to make the soup at some point, and I don't want to have to rely on escarole being available because maybe it won't be. So what I'll do is get the escarole, take off the outer leaves, which is what I use for the soup, and then use the rest for salad. Blanch it, And then you just take a bunch of escarole, roll it into a ball, and squeeze it. Here, let me do it over this container. So squeeze it. So you're squeezing the water out of it. As much as you can get. This is a small bowl, but I'm just doing this to illustrate how I would freeze it. All right, so you get as much of the water out as you possibly can. Wrap it up in plastic wrap in a bowl. Wait until it cools. So wrap it up in plastic wrap and then pop that in the freezer. Then when you're ready to use it, you can defrost it. So you don't have to defrost it fully. I actually like it if it's still slightly frozen. It's easier to cut. So you take it out of the freezer, defrost it slightly, and then you can just chop it up and throw it in your soup. That's it. So what I'm going to do today, because I'm not freezing it, I am going to squeeze the water out. And just chop it up for my soup. Might be a lot for this soup. So we'll see. I think it'll be okay. Now, you know what? I don't think I have that much broth, so I think I'm just going to use this for my soup today and put one ball in the freezer with some mini meatballs. So that if I ever get a craving for scuddol soup, I'll have it ready to go. Okay, so this is for my soup today. This is for later. I'm going to use most of the meatballs. I'll freeze the rest. And I'm going to have a little snack here. Actually, let's take a look at these meatballs. So it looks nice and juicy. It's cooked. Crunchy on the outside. Nice and tender inside. I can taste the locatelli. Slight hint of garlic. Delicious. Okay, my broth has been cooking for a while. The carrots have softened up. So I'm going to add my greens. So we use escarole. You can put spinach. You could actually make this with spinach if you can't find escarole. I'm going to add the meatballs. But you could put other greens as well. I'm just showing you the way we made it. Okay, so I think I made the right call setting aside some of the escarole to put in the freezer because there's not really a lot of broth here. Looks pretty good. Has a lot of meatballs. I love the meatballs. So now I'm just going to let this cook for maybe about 15 minutes for the meat to flavor the broth and to let those greens cook a little bit more and make sure that my carrots and my celery are fully cooked. Here we have it. Italian wedding soup, scuddol soup, holiday soup, call it what you want. But try it, it's really delicious. Not that hard to make. Okay, so for salt, we use locatelli. This is pecorino romano. And then I like black pepper. Ah, it smells so good. This is full of meatballs. There's a lot of meatballs in here. So let's see how it tastes. Mm. It is the perfect marriage between the meat and the greens and that locatelli. It just adds to it. So good. The greens are really good today because I didn't cook them too much. So they still have a little bit of a crunch to them. Not bitter at all. The meatballs are perfect, full of flavor. All right, I'm really happy with this. So I have a little ball of escarole I'm going to pop in the freezer with a few meatballs. Next time I have some extra chicken stock, just throw it together. Really simple. So try it. The meatballs, they take a while. If you have kids, put them to work. Get them off their phones. Make them do something with their hands. They'll like it. Trust me. And then they get a little meatball as a reward. All right, so try it. Let me know what you think. If this is something that you make in your family, you do it a little bit differently, let me know. Please, let's not argue. It's okay. People do things different ways. That's what makes the world go round. But I like hearing about other ways that people do things. So if you have your own spin on Italian wedding soup or whatever you call it, let me know in the comments. Remember to like this video, subscribe. I hope you're enjoying these videos. I know I'm not, the most professional here. Sometimes my mic goes out and, the lighting is not great, but what are you going to do? This is a new thing for me. So I'm just sharing some of my favorite recipes and I'm eating a lot. So I hope you appreciate my sacrifice. Okay, see you next time. Bye.